Hi, I'm not doing a joke for this part. The day before I was going to start writing the script, the news broke that Technoblade had passed away due to sarcoma. I usually wouldn't talk about serious stuff on this channel, but this is something that affects a community that this channel is rooted in. The Minecraft community will always be one of the most positive communities I've ever been in, and losing someone important to that community has affected a ton of people. I've linked a bunch of sarcoma research and treatment charities in the description. Any donation helps, and don't feel bad if you can't donate. Just spreading the word is helping. Alright, now let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. The most common answer you'll hear as to what the worst FNAF game is probably FNAF 3. I've made a video where I played FNAF 3 and my thoughts boil down to, it's fine, I guess. Some people might say Security Breach or even FNAF 4, and Security Breach kinda sucks, so it might seem like a good candidate, but it's still clearly a game that was at least well developed to some degree, even if the gameplay, horror, almost all of the game is lacking. But I don't think a single person thinks Help Wanted is even remotely close to a contender for the worst FNAF game. And I'd agree, the game is pretty close to the best it could have been given that Scott's story had already reached its end, so any addition would have probably sucked for the story, and obviously they did have to cut some corners to have it come out in a reasonable time, which doesn't really hurt the game itself because it's more about the experience of FNAF in VR than the games themselves. The thing is, not everyone played that version of Help Wanted. You see, anyone playing these games on YouTube is rich and probably owned a VR headset years before they had even played the game, but the average person will never own a VR headset, mainly because the cheapest okay one you can get is like $400, and what that means is that there is an alarmingly large portion of people who only ever experience this game in its flat mode, and as I stated, the game heavily relies on the VR aspects. Before I talk about the specific parts of the game, I want to share how fucking incompetent Oculus support is. I wanted to play the game in VR as well as flat mode for this video, and every fucking time I tried to launch the Oculus app installer, I would agree to the terms and conditions and it would say no connection. Excuse me, Facebook, I'm writing this with an internet connection. But when I tried to contact Meta support, my support agent, this motherfucker kept saying to open up the app and repair it or something, even though it's not the app that's broken, it's the installer. Then I went to email and the same shit happened. It ended up being an issue with my ad blocker, but what if the installer was actually broken and this idiot prevented me from using this $300 device? Anyway, upon starting up the game, my first impression was, holy shit, this game is beautiful and it runs at a consistent 75 FPS, what the fuck? I mean, it makes sense, they probably spent more time optimizing it because it's meant to be played in VR and I'm not, but the average FNAF player is like 9 and probably doesn't have 7,000 to drop on a PC to play Five Nights at Freddy's at 12 FPS. Also, a lot of the graphical quality can be attributed to Unreal Engine. I stand by both in criticizing and praising games that graphics are nice, but they don't matter if your game sucks. But aside from graphics from night one, I could already tell this game is a little undercooked in some aspects. Even just in the menus, multiple times I ended up having to Alt F4 because the back button wouldn't do anything. When I went into FNAF 1, I immediately noticed something weird. I'm not 100% sure that it's intentional, but without VR, when you right-click the left hall, Foxy comes, no matter what night you're on. I'm fairly certain this was meant to be implemented for VR so you can't look out your hallway, but also the right hallway doesn't do anything, and it's pretty hard to accidentally look out, but it's very easy to accidentally move your mouse 1.5 inches and right-click. Like, the only way I could imagine you doing this in VR is by falling over. Something I noticed which isn't completely game-breaking, but I very much disliked it, there is, to my knowledge, no way to see Bonnie when he's at the left door. Maybe he blocks some of your door light, but it was originally far easier to see him in the left door. And it's definitely easier to see Chica. What I think is that you're supposed to be able to get a better angle on him in VR, but I can't do that. I also never properly got VR working. You can also open your door and flash your light, but he ended up locking my door controls the second time I tried to look if he was still there. Another thing that bothered me that is continuous throughout FNAF 1, 2, and 3 is that the camera is always up, and in FNAF 1 it doesn't even take power. It's a little better in FNAF 3 because at least it turns off your normal cameras when you look at the vent cameras and vice versa, and I do acknowledge that it's kind of weird for a screen to be taking up 100% of your vision while already in VR, because normally there's one for each eye, but I would prefer if you at least had to turn your cameras on in order to see them. But overall, FNAF 1 gets a Malady Channel certified tolerable rating. Also, it's pronounced Malady. FNAF 2 was not very good. It's weird, because of the games that got a full Help Wanted version, Scott developed FNAF 2 was by far my favorite. But one of the reasons is because, especially toward the end, FNAF 2 is incredibly chaotic, but Help Wanted cuts off every game past Night 4. And I understand that it's because it's about the experience, not the details of the gameplay itself, but I don't think they realize that the best of FNAF 2 doesn't really translate to a VR experience. The first thing I noticed was that the lights are kind of clunky, like having to reach down to press the lights is not something I'm used to. But I can't really blame Steelwool for this one. It's a VR game, so playing it on a keyboard and mouse is definitely not going to be an ideal experience. Speaking of the lights, I dislike how they're implemented aside from their clunkiness. Like, if you try to flash the lights in the vents and there's an animatronic in there, it just gives a little click. Whereas in OG FNAF, you see an actual sprite of the character. Also, the click happens from any opening, not just the one that has an animatronic. I will say Balloon Boy and Help Wanted does actually show up in the vents, however, it's a little hard to miss because it plays the same sound that would play in FNAF 1 when an animatronic was at your door. But then I noticed the worst aspect of this entire game and entire franchise, in my opinion. The flashlight battery appears to not exist. It might be possible that it does exist, it's just invisible, which I'd argue is even less sensible, but I did use my flashlight quite a lot, so I'd be surprised if it could actually run out. And this, combined with the flashlights being errored from any direction, means you can just keep the middle hall flashlight on, wind up the music box, and hit space whenever the flashlight errors to put on your Freddy mask. Now, you do still have to worry about Foxy with this strategy, but if you just pay attention to the game, it's not that hard to start flashing your light when you see him. There's also a few inconsistencies with real FNAF 2 that, while not game-breaking, are definitely a bit irritating. Like how certain phases of animatronic movements just aren't fucking there. Like Toy Bonnie only has an animation for going through the hallway, and the same thing happens with Toy Freddy, where he only has one phase in the hall. FNAF 2 gets a certified subpar rating. FNAF 3, contrary to the main games, was probably the least shitty in Help Wanted. The gameplay is near identical to classic FNAF 3, actually that might not be a good thing, but this video isn't about the original games. As much as I could spend another hour ranting about FNAF 3, the only gameplay difference that I noticed was that for some reason, playing audio doesn't lure Springtrap most of the time. It usually took me at least 3 tries playing the audio before he moved, whereas in the original game, it usually would only take 1, maybe 2. I also dislike that you can use the cameras while rebooting stuff. Now, I'm not sure what the fuck Steelwool was thinking, but some of the phantoms are invisible. Not even like partially transparent, just like straight up invisible. Foxy isn't, and I never saw Chica, but BB, Mangle, and Freddy are all transparent, aside from their eyes and some texturing on their body. My game might just be broken, but if this was intentional, I don't even know what their thought process was. Oh, and speaking of the models, Springtrap is so fucking ugly. He's not that horrifically ugly, but compared to the real deal FNAF 3, he almost looks cute. He's too fuzzy looking and just looks a bit goofy overall. Not to mention a lot of the gore that Springtrap had is just straight up gone. Cotton Core FNAF 3 does have a few cases where he's just at a bad angle or he just looks weird, but Help Wanted is definitely a noticeable downgrade. Additionally, the darker style of FNAF 3 brings up by far the most noticeable difference between the old school games and these, and it's that the cameras are horrible. They're actually probably the best they are in FNAF 3. However, in general, they're staticky and feel way too dark. They don't take up all of your screen, so they're even harder to see in flat mode. But back on Springtrap being ugly as fuck, I feel like Steelwool just didn't know how to do proper models in the same detail as the original games, and that's why they didn't do a FNAF 4. They took one look at the nightmares and said, oh my fucking god, will Scott just let us do fun with Plush Trap? Speaking of which, fuck the Darkrooms. The first 2 are literally just fun with plush trap reskins, and just like Night Terrors and FNAF 3, a lot of the models are pretty close to the originals, but they're just fuzzier and less detailed. If you really want to play fun with plush trap, just play FNAF 4. The third one is original, but it also sounds absolutely awful. And according to the wiki, Funtime Foxy's level is just the same as crawling through Funtime Auditorium and Sister Location. I tried for like 45 minutes to get past Fun with Plush Trap, and I just couldn't, so I will not be talking about the Darkrooms anymore. I suppose here's a good time to talk about the story. Actually, there's never a good time to talk about the story of Help Wanted. I absolutely despise this. They ruined any lore relevance Ultimate Custom Night could have had to the story and it being William Afton's hell, and instead they just made him a big evil virtual bunny man. And like, I understand that it's not unheard of for FNAF to make dead characters whose souls exist within animatronics, but William Afton's soul is just in a computer, not even an animatronic. It's just in like a virtual bunny suit. But by far my biggest issue is that his soul, according to the lore, should be destroyed. Fire is the only thing that can destroy Remnant, and since Scraptrap was Ina Henry's fire at the end of Pizza Sim, he should be dead there. And the reason the souls of the children in Bonnie, Chica, Freddy, and Foxy were all still there was because they had Remnant within them, and it's the reason why Elizabeth's soul was still in Baby, and why Michael and William were still alive up until that point. Not to mention, since they're both have Remnant, why would Michael and Elizabeth die but not William? And what if they're all alive? By my interpretation, the reason William was trying to kill Michael in FNAF 3 was because he wanted the legacy of the Afton family to die. And ultimately, they got their wish at the end of FNAF 6, and that was the same reason Michael wanted to find him and used a fake name working for the FNAF 1 location, and why he came to Fazbear's Fright. He wanted to kill the man responsible for killing the robots, creating the robots that were responsible for killing the only other family he had, and William wanted to get revenge on Michael for being somewhat responsible for the death of his youngest son, and would end his legacy in the process. And this is why my FNAF meta theory is that none of it means anything and the entire story was an accident and Scott has been leading us astray for almost 8 years. Parts and service is actually pretty good. Next to Night Terrors, I'd probably say it's the second least VR relevant of the Help Wanted minigames. They do only use FNAF 1 models, which in Help Wanted are my favorite. I like the difficulty curve of each challenge. Bonnie goes first, and his challenge is basically just do what Andy Field tells you to. You take out his eyes, which, although you might miss that the narrator refers to Bonnie's directions instead of yours, it's still fairly easy. The faceplate suddenly opening is a bit startling, but it's far from scary. Then you just listen to the notes that his guitar plays and retune the obviously out-of-tune string. I will say they could have made the string being out of tune a little less obvious, just so it's possible to not notice it. You can play the notes as many times as you want, so it's not like it makes it harder, just a bit more interesting. And once you're done tuning the guitar, you put his eyes back, close up the faceplates, and you're good to go. Well, it's not bad. I do think that it lacks somewhat in replayability. There's very little skill involved, so once you've done it once, if you remember what to do, you don't even need to be told it anymore. And it's not a huge challenge to remember what to do. I like Chica's parts and service. Basically, some idiot kids threw pizza all over her. Maybe they wanted her to strip and didn't have any cash on them, so they just used pizza. Also, they ripped her arm off. One way or another, you gotta clean pizza off of her. After cleaning, you check her beak for pizza, and I actually think the angle in the pose she's in when you open her beak, reminiscent of one of her poses in the right hall in FNAF 1, is actually somewhat intimidating, especially with how close you are. But anyway, a bunch of cockroaches crawl their way out of her face, and you gotta spray her down with Raid or some shit. I like that after hand unit it tells you not to breathe in the chemi spray, it plays the FNAF 3 hyperventilating sound. Then after you do that, you reattach her arm and there's more cockroaches, so you spray her with Raid again, and the cupcake just says fuck it and leaves. My thoughts on this are pretty mixed. First off, the cupcake just leaving is so fucking goofy. If the cupcake can leave Chica, then Chica might as well be able to. And also, this is my first bug in parts and service. I went to pick up the cupcake and accidentally put it back down, and it just straight up fucking fell through the floor. Like this fucker no-clipped. However, I do like this because it's the first time in parts and service that's more than just following instructions. You actually need some sense of timing and to only click once or the floor stops existing. But if you can successfully click once, then you should be fine and then you can leave. It's pretty good, although the bugs only get worse from here. Freddy's parts and service was definitely the most underwhelming of the four you play, at least on mouse and keyboard. Bonnie's is like objectively worse, but it's not supposed to be complicated because it's the first one you play. You start by removing the hat of a child who presumably got Bite of 87, then you pull on Freddy Bear's bow tie to open his chest cavity where you remove presumably the same child's watch and shoe. But there's a safety latch in his chest that blocks you from accessing certain parts of his chest at certain times. So it's more of only having to worry about timing. But here, I will say that the timing is just a bit too easy with a mouse and keyboard. Like, I got this first try on my original playthrough of the game. But regardless, you remove the watch, and then you have to take out his music box to retrieve the shoe from behind it. I genuinely don't know how this fucking kid got his watch and shoe stuck inside of Freddy without getting kicked out of the pizzeria, but whatever. Then a safety latch has to be restarted, and you reset it by hitting a button. Then you can dispose of the shoe, but when you try to put his music box back in, you drop it. I'm fairly certain there's no way to not drop it. But anyway, you think you're fucked, but you just grab another one, and it's all good. Then you honk his nose and close Frederick up, and go about your day. Foxy is by far the best and also the buggiest of parts in service. First, you need to put his head back on. I guess it makes sense, because he's supposedly been out of service for some time. But, like, come on, guys, at least put his head on for me. But anyway, after that, all of his servos are messed up. 3 of them don't have anything in them, and 1 has the wrong fuse. So you just have to put his leg fuse back, but you do have to wait for his legs to stop moving, which is a shorter window than the timing aspects of Chica and Freddy's minigames. But then Unreal Engine crashed right when I was about to put back Foxy's leg fuse. If any nerds out there know what happened, here's the crash report. But anyway, I put his leg fuse back in, and then I had to swap his chest and right arm fuse, no issues. Then when I was about to put in one of his chest fuses, Unreal Engine crashed again, with the same error. Also, when I first played this, I noticed that when Foxy is running at you after you fuck up, he tracks with your screen instead of the room, which was more funny than anything. Whatever, I restarted it, and this time I got to put in both of his chest fuses with no error. Then I replaced his eye, which is covered by an eye patch, so I'm not sure why that was required, and I finished the parts and service section. Overall, parts and service section, 7.5 out of 10 from me. Now, vent repair. My thoughts are kind of mixed on vent repair. It suffers from the same thing that parts and service suffers from, where after the first time and you know all the steps, it's just way too easy to replay it. There's more skill in this than in parts and service, but it definitely has that lack of replayability. Now, there is 2 modes in vent repair, and they are very different. There's Mangle and Ennard. Mangle's vent repair is easier and definitely has a heavier lack of interesting replayability. Essentially, you're repairing the vents. Mangle's in there. You need to get all of these 4 lights to turn on. You press this button to turn on a light, and Mangle's right in front of you. Then you flip a switch, which took me way too long to find on my first playthrough. Flip another switch to open up a second vent that is already perfectly functional for normal ventilation. But in order to make it more dangerous, you need to remove the fan, then turn some valves to stop leaks, and play a pretty simple memory game. But if you hear Mangle's footsteps in the vents, you just need to shine your light at him and she goes away. I'll definitely say the panic when you hear his footsteps was definitely the most scared I was when playing this game. I think Mangle was a perfect choice for this minigame. I feel like Scott designed her to crawl around the vents. I will say, my first time around, I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do. And I assumed it was more similar to FNaF 3, where your obligations as a night guard are just to make sure nothing breaks and you get out at 6 AM. There was no actual time display, but there was also no flashlight in FNaF 2, so it would make sense. But I was very wrong. Mangle's vent repair overall is definitely the one I prefer of the 2, mainly because Ennard's vent repair was, You go down an elevator to a breaker room, and one of the 3 doors you see opens. You see 4 buttons wired to 4 fuse boxes with lights on top of them. Essentially, it's just scrambled, and you need to find which button connects to which box. Red lights mean you need to press the button, and if all of the lights are green, the door closes and the next one opens. In the second door, it's similar, but the cables are longer and harder to trace back to their buttons. So you match the buttons to the fuses, and the lights and the door closes. Then, once the next one opens, you see a similar length cables and room size to that of the second room. However, this time, Ennard's just fucking chilling in there. You can also look out into the room because certain lights and cables are blocked from your view. The thing is, I'm not sure if you have limited time to look outside of the elevator. Once I was fairly certain that an attempt of the minigame was just a lost cause, so I looked out while Ennard was right in front of me and nothing happened until I went back in and started spamming buttons. It's not that big of a deal, but I feel like having a limit to how long you can look outside of the elevator before Ennard will automatically kill you would have been a more interesting mechanic. At first I figured, alright cool, that was fun, but I'm ready to be done with vent repair now. And then I realized it's not done yet. The elevator went down another level into the ventilation shaft, and this part was the fucking worst. Essentially, Ennard's moving around in the ventilation shaft, and you have to move a bunch of gears into place. Not that bad, right? You see, the thing is, there's no checkpoint or anything between the top segment and the bottom segment. If you fail, you have to just restart from the beginning. It was to the point where I put a gear in the wrong place and died, and I didn't even want to try again. I just said, fuck this, I'm not getting all the way back here again. And I probably wouldn't have even gotten to that segment if I wasn't making a video, because for a while, I was just too stupid to learn how the buttons work in the first segment for like 20 minutes. Vent repair overall, 6 out of 10. Finally, we have night terrors. As I stated, I believe these relied the least on the VR aspects. There's Funtime Freddy, Nightmarian, Circus Baby, and Nightmare Fredbear. Funtime Freddy is quite similar to normal FNaF 4's Nightmare Fredbear. It's a simple gameplay loop. Check your door, flash your light. If he's at your door, shut it as fast as possible, wait for him to move, and check the other door. If your closet is open, you need to shut him in. The only difference is that Funtime Freddy can't go onto your bed. There's also Bonbon and Bonnet who do something. Bonbon has a jump scare, but it doesn't kill you, and I have no idea what Bonnie does aside from that when you flash your light on her, she goes away. Also, Funtime Freddy is ugly, 4 out of 7. Then there's Nightmarian. I'm not 100% sure what Nightmarian's mechanic is. It seems to just be Funtime Freddy. It can go to your left or right door, but it never appears in your closet. Only its tentacles come out of it, and it can come through the ceiling. The other main difference is that instead of going away when you flash your light on it, or close your door when it's closed, the Nightmarian only goes away when it reaches your door and you shut it. The only thing I dislike is Nightmarian's jump scare. It's just awful. It's a fine animation, but the sound isn't even remotely scary. 9 out of 14. Circus Baby's one is actually really good. It's quite different from Funtime Freddy and Nightmarian's, but in a way that I really like. It's not very complicated. Baby walks around the room. When she looks at you, you close the door. But if you close the door too long, the scariest thing in all of FNaF will start shaking harder and harder until it jump scares you. I don't think most people realize this, but Baby is fucking massive. She's like 9 feet tall, and you're in the perspective of a child. Also, I got this abomination for completing Baby's Night. 7 out of 9, Baby's a girl boss. Nightmare Fredbear is definitely my least favorite. I was hoping to have something else that wasn't just in the recreation of a FNaF 4 bedroom. It's not as bad as it could have been, but I found that the gameplay loop was weirdly hard. I would check each door a few times, and just eventually he would end up getting in without me even having a chance to close him off. I'm also a bit confused on his mechanics. The wiki says he moves faster when you flash a light on him, but for me, he just immediately killed me. I also think that for how scary Nightmare Fredbear is, his jump scare is horribly placed. Like, it takes several seconds for him to move towards you after you see him, so you would have a good deal of time to accept your death. The jump scare itself is okay, but I wouldn't say it's as good as the original, where he's biting and pulling you closer to his jaws. 10 out of 10, game sucks, but I'd smash Fredbear. I guess if I had to come to a conclusion, the game, although some aspects I dislike by their nature, are still better in VR and aren't supposed to be played the way I did. You could argue it's unfair to judge a game like this, but a substantial portion of the player base experienced it like this. It's not worth ruling out as a candidate for the worst game completely. I'd say if you really just want to have a FNaF-like experience, Help Wanted Flat Mode is okay. FNaF 1, 2, and 3 are $21 together, or I guess $20.97, and Help Wanted is $30. But you also get some mini games with it. Anyway, the worst game is FNaF 3, idiot, shut your mouth, nerd. Alright guys, if you like this video and want to support me, I'd recommend not. Goodbye. Alright, here's something else for the people who stayed and watched to the end. I'm working on a Choose Your Own Adventure series, similar to In Space with Markiplier, but not in space. You can probably guess what it's about, but I'll keep it a secret for a while. And as of the uploading of this video, I've just started recording for it. It's probably going to be about a week wait for a proper trailer, and then it's going to be ready for release in about 3 weeks. I'm super excited to work on this and get it released. It's one of the coolest things I've been able to work on so far, and I'm really happy with how the script has come out so far. Oh, and 1,000 days progress is good. I'm currently around day 500. Anyway, goodbye for real this time.